Did you know that there have been nearly 10,000 video game industry layoffs in just 2024?
10,000?
We're not even to October yet, and we can track 9,323 jobs having been terminated due to layoffs in the video game industry. Now, there are a lot of reasons for company layoffs, and the reasons you find in the video game sector might not be the exact same reasons you'd find in the Ben & Jerry's ice cream industry, let's say. Video games are not ice cream. There are countless variables that are required to make video games happen that would never be involved in the unburdened ice cream sector.
Right?
In discussion to all these worldwide industry layoffs, Chris Deering, a former Sony executive, claimed that corporate greed is not responsible for these layoffs. In an interview, Deering stated, quote, "I don't think it's fair to say that the resulting layoffs have been greed. If the money isn't coming in from the consumers on the last game, it's going to be hard to justify spending the money for the next game. I don't think that having skill in this area is going to be a lifetime in poverty or limitation." Let's put the greed comments aside for just a moment. Deering is a former president for Sony Entertainment Europe, which means he was part of the C-suite echelon of management, and he just made a passing remark that generalized all layoffs as being part of a failure or a decline in meeting sales goals. That is just not true. Are losses in revenue a piece sometimes to layoffs? Yes, absolutely. But keep watching because we're going to talk about the other reasons Deering misses. But then, continuing his recommendation to laid-off industry workers, Deering would say, quote, "But now you're gonna have to take a few. Figure out how to get through it. Drive an Uber or whatever. Find a cheap place to live and go to the beach for a year. But keep up with it. These things do recover sometimes a lot faster than you might think." That's right. If you lost your job, just go lay on a beach for a year. Your responsibilities don't matter. Your severance package, if you got one, should cover you plenty of time for this whole thing to just blow over. It's gonna recover faster than you think.
You know?
These assertions that layoffs are sales correlated or that industry trends blow with the wind is a reductionist, dismissive position to take. To try to claim that greed is not a factor in the 10,000 plus layoffs this year is not only not true, it's a bold-faced lie. Hello, my friends, and welcome to The Pondering. I am the real-life fake wizard. If this video brings you any value at all, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, where we're posting new videos nearly every day. I want to begin with a brief overview about what a corporation is, because you hear about them all the time, but most people don't actually know how they operate. So, corporations are businesses that sell products with the goal of maximizing profits and delivering returns to the shareholders. Shareholders are the company's investors. To meet financial goals and maximize profits, the CEO and leadership must balance product development with market demand. What do people want? What are they willing to buy? How much are they willing to spend on it? The CEO announces those financial goals to the shareholders and then reports to the shareholders every quarter or so about their successes and failures.
We feel quite bullish about it. Obviously, we're heartened by the results that Netflix has delivered in their password sharing initiative and believe that it will be one of the contributors to growth, as you noted, going forward.
Typically, when a corporation does something that demonstrates growth, the value of its stock price goes up because more people buy shares of that company. When companies don't hit their financial goals, the share price goes down because people think the company is worth less. The problem is that every quarter, for eternity, the company is supposed to be reporting profits and growth, like forever. And inside of that requirement to grow, things are cut, added, lost, found. That's where the game of business is played. And believe me, it is all a game. Every bit of it. It's a game that a very select few get to play, and we, the workers, are some of the pieces on the board that executives like Chris Deering from the opening get to play with. Obviously, there's a lot more that makes up corporations and businesses, but to have a framework in mind, especially when we're talking about motivations for layoffs, it's 100% going to relate back to that profitability conundrum. Executives cut employees for many reasons, but the state of mind, the prerogative, is always going to be maximizing profits. If employees being paid stands in the way of company gains, employees will be removed, because employees are expendable. They always have been. Now, inside layoffs, we do see some common tropes come up in the statements from executives about why the layoffs are occurring. While there are many more than just 3, here are the 3 most common layoff tropes we see in the video game industry this year. The first being acquisition. When a company buys another company, layoffs are almost always going to happen. This year, and just a few days ago, Microsoft laid off 650 people from their gaming division in connection to the Activision Blizzard acquisition. Quote, as part of aligning our post-acquisition team structure and managing our business, we have made the decision to eliminate approximately 650 roles across Microsoft Gaming, mostly corporate and supporting functions, to organize our business for long-term success, says Phil Spencer, CEO of Microsoft Gaming. Now, acquisitions in the gaming industry happen all the time. Small studios are snatched up by large companies, studios are sold between companies like tennis, and very famously in Microsoft's history, they've acquired lots of large video game juggernauts. Both in Bethesda in March of 2021 and with Activision Blizzard this past October. And every time this happens, jobs get cut, because positions that were needed before, when the company was over there, are no longer needed when the company's over here. Here's another example. When Disney bought Star Wars, CEO Bob Iger was very clear that by buying Lucasfilm, there was no longer going to be a place at the table for George Lucas. That was part of the acquisition. You get $4 billion, but we run the organization now. Obviously, this is very different from the 650 folks who were let go from Microsoft, but the point remains, acquisitions equals layoffs. A second common trope is change of direction. The company's going in a different direction. This one is certainly a bit more difficult to define because a motivation to change direction and fire people could have tons of variables. However, one very clear indicator, and one that directly ties back to the greed factor, is the idea that corporations are going to maximize profits. Follow the money. We saw the release of Visions of Mana, a legacy title in the Mana series from Square Enix. There is a lot of lore here with the Mana series that ties back to Final Fantasy. I've never played any of the Mana games, but the soundtracks are fantastic. Well, on August 29th, we got the release of Visions of Mana, a long-awaited title, and on August 30th, it was announced that the studio that made the game was closing. Oka Studios is shutting down just after releasing the game. Why? Why would a company close its studio day after a major release happens? Well, firstly, there's speculation that Visions of Mana isn't selling well, but we have no sales data to prove that yet. And instead, we do need to take the company announcing the closure at face value. NetEase and Tencent rethinks Japan approach as game strategy stalls. Interesting. So NetEase, which is a Chinese company, is shutting down Oka Studios, which is a Japanese subsidiary to NetEase, in order to change direction after the success of Black Myth Wukong. I said follow the money. Black Myth Wukong sold 10 million units in 3 days. And while many online here will speculate that its success was for ideological reasons, you gotta look at it for what it is. Wukong is a Chinese product made for a Chinese market that also happened to sell very well in the West. China is a huge marketplace for the gaming industry, and after seeing Black Myth Wukong sell well, it's no surprise that NetEase and Tencent are changing direction. All right, let's time out for a second, because even talking like this, it feels like you're watching the news. It's a lot of business talk, and I'm with you. I get it. But bear with me and pay attention to this next part. Remember how I said there are shareholders that are the investors in a corporation? Well, in that article about NetEase and Tencent, it talked about how they're rethinking their approach in Japan. That means pulling their money out of Japanese companies. See, companies like Tencent, similar to BlackRock, Blackstone, State Street, and Vanguard, are corporations that buy major stakeholding positions in other corporations. See, at the beginning of the video, when I said investors and shareholders, you think it's just people buying stocks, right? Well, that's normal. It's way deeper than that. Companies buy controlling shareholder positions in other companies. Tencent, like the other investor companies I mentioned, are like investment cancer, a business parasite that buys enough shares to make very real impacts and radical changes inside the companies that they buy shares of. I brought up Disney a few minutes ago. Let's look at Disney as an example. Who owns Disney? Well, Vanguard owns 8.43%, BlackRock owns 6.67%, State Street owns 4.17%, and here in the other 76%, you find individuals like Bob Iger, the CEO, George Lucas, who owns 2% himself, mutual funds, and more investment institutions. Right. This video is about video games. Who owns EA? Let's look at EA. Oh, Vanguard. I recognize that name. Who owns Microsoft? Institutions again. All right, well, who owns Nintendo? Nintendo's in Japan, right? It's just more institutions. Oh, I hope you're starting to understand where I'm ramping to with all of this. At the beginning of this video, I said a corporation's goal is to produce growth and financial gain on behalf of shareholders. The real shareholders are not you or me. They are these investment firm megacorporations. You think the entertainment industry has a problem? You think it's rough for game devs to keep their jobs? Are you upset that Sony spent hundreds of millions on Concord? Are you upset that PlayStation 5 Pro is going to cost $700? Are you surprised that gaming companies are hell-bent on getting you hooked on subscription models? That perhaps everything has gone to subscription models now? You rent your games on Game Pass. You rent your movies on Netflix. You rent your car through your lease. You rent your home and your apartment. You will own nothing and be happy. Who is calling the shots? And why would there be such a push for that kind of renter's economy unless it was the monetary and financial success of the company's shareholders? I say all of this to come full circle on the point of changing direction. Anytime a company is saying that they're changing direction, and layoffs just so happen to be part of that, it is always to serve the shareholders. The third point, and maybe my favorite of all, is the one Chris Deering brought up himself. Sometimes loss in revenue contributes to layoffs and role terminations. When companies fail, money dries up. We saw this a few years ago with Forspoken at Square Enix, and we're seeing it this year with Sony. No, not with Concord, not yet. Sony lays off 900 PlayStation employees, reducing its headcount by 8%. And this took place back in February of 2024. Specifically, this tied into a failure to hit PlayStation 5 sales goals in 2023, a less than stellar track record with VR, as one of the VR studios closes, and many other factors with many of the PlayStation-focused studios. Layoffs in the case of being a response to sales failures is almost always a signal to shareholders that by reducing costs of labor and employees, reaching profitability will be easier because there's less money being spent to then have to break even on. This happens all the time in every industry. We see labor get cut when harsh economic times hit, which then puts more pressure on the people who are still employed, needing to do double the work now and/or face constant pressure to improve. However, there's one definitive case study of a company that refused to cut employees during a financial hardship. Sir, we have a terrible problem right now. Yes? Sir, it's the Wii U. It's a commercial and critical failure. It's currently 2013, Mr. Satoru Iwata of the Nintendo company. What do you recommend we do? Sir, we need to lay off lots and lots of people. I think we cancel the Joy-Con initiative and we go back to the Nintendo 64 remote. No. No? What do you mean, no? I have the solution. Yes, the former president of Nintendo took a pay cut to avoid layoffs after the Wii U underperformed. This was huge and frankly inspiring. Quote, I sincerely doubt employees who fear that they may be laid off will be able to develop software titles that could impress people. Now we know that this could have been culturally motivated, but regardless, the idea of leading by example here is a huge takeaway. The Nintendo Switch wouldn't hit the market until 2017, and the Wii U would remain on the market in that time, but you still had colossal sales in the form of the Nintendo DS and then the 3DS. In the marketplace now, Nintendo remains a force of nature that makes great games. In these discussions of video game layoffs and the way that these news articles are shared, it makes you think that actual game designers and game devs are all getting the boot, and in some cases they are, but we don't always know just who is getting fired, which is something to keep in mind. It could be the people designing Kay Vess's face, or it could be the coffee bro on the third floor. Regardless, the lesson, the key takeaway for you to remember is that layoffs, no matter what industry, are always related back to appealing to the interests of shareholders, and the shareholders, the true shareholders, are not you or me. My friends, I want to thank you for joining me for this Pondering Special. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. If you're new here and want to see more videos like this, consider hitting the subscribe button. Until next time, create, innovate, inspire. May the contrived thread of destiny be with you from the Acolyte. And for the love of God, cancel Disney Plus. Take care. See you next time. Deuces.